A Southern California tenant is upset that a small landlord, me, doesn't like rent control and other California anti-landlord policies. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting topic for you today, and it's coming out of my comments section. Now, I was reading through my comments, and I saw a comment that just really caught my eye. And the thing is, it's from a tenant. It's from a person who, is from an opposing viewpoint of what I talk about all the time. And I wanted to bring this comment to the people who watch my videos, so that they could form their own opinions. Obviously, we're all going to have different opinions, and I have no problem with tenants expressing their opinions about what I think, okay? But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to disagree with you. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to rip apart your opinion and tell you why you're wrong, because you are wrong. And I'm going to do that today in this video. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting, different sort of video, and I hope that you like this sort of thing, because I'll do this more often. If there are other tenants out there who want to leave comments, feel free to do that. So before I get into this story, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think, okay? Especially the tenants who watch my videos. If you disagree with me, if you disagree with my opinions, let it be known, okay? I don't moderate comments at all. Zero moderation of comments. You can put whatever you want in there. I don't delete it. I don't change it. I don't edit it out. If there's any moderation, then, it wasn't done by me, okay? I go specifically into each video that I create saying that there will be no moderation, because I believe that people should have the right to state their opinions, even if I disagree with them. So yeah, put in your comments of what you think of this story after I read it, and what you think of what I'm saying. But before I go too much into a rant, let me go ahead and get started with this comment. So this comment is actually coming from my video, California County wants to give free money to tenants to pay landlords and stop evictions, right? So yeah, I created that video back on January the 20th, and the user, her name is Crystal Shepherd, and I'll go ahead and get started with it. I know your target audience is landlords, but as a forever renter in Southern California, your contempt for renters is truly offensive. Many landlords here will not accept money from another entity, so assistance has to be given to the renter. I don't doubt there are always bad apples, but the majority use assistance for its intended purpose. There are organized criminal elements that exploit vulnerable people in assistance schemes. So I'm going to stop right there, okay? So the first thing, in your first paragraph, you stated that you're a forever renter. Okay, that's a personal choice. I don't care if you're a forever renter because you choose to be a forever renter, but I'm probably gonna say that the real reason you're a forever renter is because you want to live in Southern California and the housing costs are so high. Okay, and the reason housing costs are so high is what I bring up. The reason why rents are so high is what I bring up in my videos, okay? I bring these issues up because everything is interconnected. We sit here and we say, okay, well, we need to make housing affordable for renters. We need to make housing more affordable by telling landlords what they can charge for rent, by prohibiting landlords from being able to raise their rents and evict tenants. We're gonna force them to provide this affordable housing, right? But it actually has the opposite effect. So when you live in a place like Southern California, a very popular place, a place where a lot of people live and a lot of people want to live, and then you tell the landlords that, hey, we're not going to give you any opportunity whatsoever to make a return on your investment, then you're going to basically drive a lot of people out of business. You're going to make it so that people don't want to be landlords, and there's going to be a shortage of housing. And the law of supply and demand, well, it speaks, it tells you everything you need to know. It tells you that if there is a limited supply and there's a strong demand, well, guess what? Price is going to go up. So the reason that housing is unaffordable is because of we're lacking supply. Period. That's it. But let me continue, because you say a few other things in there. It says many landlords won't accept money from another entity, so assistance has to be given to the renter. And so that's a bunch of garbage. That's a bunch of garbage. Okay. Simply put, and remember, I'm speaking specifically about Section 8. I'm not talking about other assistance programs, right? But the Section 8 program, it says, oh, well, landlords won't accept the money from these entities. Well, when it comes to Section 8, you have to accept it from them. Okay, there's no option. At least not that I've heard of. Maybe California law is different. Maybe they will pay Section 8 directly to the tenants. But remember that by putting the money into the hands of these tenants, you are basically ensuring that a large portion of that money will never see the landlord. And you're guaranteeing that a large portion of that money will be spent for other purposes. Okay? Guaranteeing it, because you are making it easy to commit fraud. Easy to commit fraud by, telling these tenants basically you can pocket this money and nothing can be done about it. That's the problem. Okay? People who normally wouldn't be committing this sort of fraud by, taking that money and saying, if you pay the landlord directly, basically you guarantee that the money that the landlord is owed will get to that landlord. Okay. If you pay the tenant, then there is a likelihood, and I'm not saying that all of the tenants in the program are going to do this, right? But even if 5% of the tenants decide that they're going to just take that money and run, right? Well, that is a lot of people. That is a lot of money being wasted. And that's dumb. That's absolutely idiotic, where it could have been 100% of that money going straight to them. It boggles my mind. It boggles my mind that they would even think that was a good idea. It says, now she says, most people can't afford to buy, or in my case, have no desire to buy. I've lived in my rent-controlled apartment for 30 plus years, and some of my neighbors have been here longer. Our neighborhood has a mix of homeowners and renters. Affordable rental housing helps create communities and often long-term residents. I understand rental properties are investments, but for renters, it's a home. So here's the thing. You say you have no desire to buy. Well, of course you don't have a desire to buy. You have a rent-controlled property. It is far cheaper to live in housing subsidized by someone else for 30 plus years than it would have ever been to buy a house. Okay? You are sitting there, you're sitting pretty. This is part of the problem that rent control has, right? The people who are lucky enough to get a rent controlled apartment, they're sitting pretty in their cheap place for 30 years. But for everyone else, and I mean everyone else, right? They cannot get a rent control place because you're sitting in there for so long. Okay? Do you think your housing needs, and this is the thing, right? You're like, oh, well, this creates long-term residents. No, it doesn't. Okay? It doesn't help anybody long-term. Do you think your housing needs haven't changed in the last 30 years? I mean, I guess if you are one of those people who is perpetually single for 30 plus years, I don't know about you, but I think about me 30 years ago when I was 14 years old. I was living with my parents, my brother and sister. That was me 30 years ago, right? Then I think about myself after I moved out of my parents' house. It was just me living alone. Okay? Now, here I am. I'm married and I got my own family. I got a dog and everything. So my housing needs have changed a lot over a 30-year period. Meanwhile, you're living in the same place that you were 30 years ago. How? Your housing needs had to have changed, or maybe you haven't changed, okay? But most people, this is what I'll say, most people, their housing needs change. So as you get older, your kids grow up and they move out, you might need a smaller house. Or when you're young and you're single, you might just need a studio. When you get a family, you might have 2, 3, 4 kids, and you might need a big 5-bedroom place. But simply put, your housing needs they don't stay the same. They're not something that is static. It's not like, oh, you can just move into this place and stay there for 30 plus years. I mean, unless you buy like a forever home or something like that, right? But this is the reason why renters in general, they have to move, eventually. They do. It happens, right? It's not common. I mean, it is extremely uncommon for people to stay somewhere for 30 plus years. And the only reason people would do that is because they have rent that is subsidized so much, right? That they can't find anywhere to live for as cheap as what they're getting right now. And two, they've got such a bargain that it would be, like giving up a free lottery ticket, if they gave up their rented place. Okay, it's ridiculous. Okay, it's absolutely ridiculous that you've been in the same rented place for 30 years. I have tenants in my properties who've been in for like 5 years. But eventually those tenants, they move on too. Nobody stays in a place for 30. It's very, very rare outside of a rent control place. That's what I'll say. Okay. Very, very rare. So when you see rent control is the only reason you're able to stay there. So the way I know what you're thinking, you're like, oh, well, that's proof that rent control is necessary so that people don't have to move. Well, think of it this way, right? If the government came up to me right now and they said, hey, we're going to force this landlord of this $10 million beach mansion over here to rent the place to you for $1,000 a month in perpetuity, right? I would go over and I would rent that place I'd pay them $1,000 a month for the rest of my life, and I would never move out of that place, whether I needed the space or not, right? But that landlord would be taking thousands of dollars a month in losses every single month that I lived there. And I'd be living in his place off of his hard-earned money on his back in a place that I can't actually afford, only because the government is forcing him to do that. Okay? Yeah, I know that's an extreme example, but you don't seem to understand that this is exactly what you are doing. This is exactly what you're doing. You're forcing a landlord to subsidize your living when you simply put, you need to pay your own way. And if you can't afford to live in Southern California, you need to move somewhere you can't afford to live. Okay? That's what I had to do. I can't afford to live in the place where I wanted to live, so I had to live somewhere that I actually could afford. Oh, and it just happened to be Omaha, Nebraska. So, hey, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. And I know that in your mind, these socialist programs they're so great because you benefited personally from them. But what happens when other people's money runs out? What happens when the landlords say, I'm not doing this anymore. I have refused to participate. We're not going to build new housing. We're not going to rent our properties out. We're done. Well, that's when the system starts to fail. The system starts to fail, and what you end up with is Southern California, essentially, where you have housing costs that are through the roof for the few properties that aren't stuck under these rent control policies, even though they passed a statewide rent control. So, everybody's stuck under it now. So then you start to see people fleeing the state, okay? The population declining in one of the most beautiful states in the entire country. California is beautiful. It's a beautiful state with great weather. And, if it wasn't for awful bureaucracy, a lot of people would want to live there. But that bureaucracy ruined it for so many people, made it so that even the people who are from there, they want to escape. Isn't that terrible? It's absolutely terrible. But anyway, I'm ranting. I'm all over the place on this one, right? I just want to let you know that I disagree with what you say. I don't think that landlords are out there doing a bad job. I don't agree with the rent control policy. I don't believe anyone has an entitlement to affordable housing. I believe that you should only be able to get the housing that you can afford, and it shouldn't be subsidized by other private property owners, okay? And I don't think the government should ever set artificial price controls on anything. And I mean anything, okay? So if you disagree with me, go ahead and put a comment down in the comment section down below.